Yep. Okay, this is the grade 7 practice test for tomorrow's test. I apologize for not posting it yesterday, but I remember now, so hopefully tonight you're going to use it to study. Question 1 says the first common multiple of 6 and 8. The first common multiple of 6 and 8 is 48. So what we're going to do here is we're going to find the multiples of each of them. So we're going to go 6, 12, so 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, and 40. I'm going to stop there at 48 because it says the first common multiple is 48. So for 8, they would be 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, and 48. Now 48 is a common multiple, but the true and false says it's the first common multiple. So the answer is false, and the reason why is 24 is the first common multiple they share, so not 48. So the answer for the first question is false. The second question says the third common multiple of 2 and 3, the third common multiple of 2 and 3 is 18. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to write all the multiples of 2, 2, 4, 6, and they're the multiples of both 2 and 3. So we're going to look for the common multiples. Well, the first common multiple they share is 6. The second common multiple they share is 12. And the third common multiple they share is 18. So the third common multiple is 18, so therefore question 2 is true. Question 3 says 3/4 plus 2/5 is greater than 1. Is this true or false? Well, the first thing I have to do is add these two together. I'm going to use my common denominator of 20. And the equivalent fraction to that is going to be 15/20 plus 8/20. And when I have 15/20 and I add 8/20 to it, I will have 23/20, which is 1 and 3/20. So the whole thing adds up to be that. Is 1 and 3/20 greater than 1? Yes, it is. So the answer for question 3 is true. Question 4, a little bit more complicated. It says 2 1/4 take away 1 1/5 is greater than 3/5 plus 5/8. So we're going to have to add both of these now, and then subtract the other side. So when you subtract mixed numbers, remember the easiest thing to do is change them to improper. Find your common denominator. Create your equivalent fractions. And subtract your numerator. So 45 take away 24 is 21. So 21 over 20 is real. Oh, not 2, sorry. It's actually 1 and 1/20. So the answer to 2 1/4 take away 1 1/5 is 1 1/20. So is 1 1/20 greater than the sum of these two? Well, I'm going to need my common denominator here, so I'm going to use 40. And I'm going to make this 24/40. That's the same as 3/5. And over here, we're going to make this 25/40. So we're going to add those together. That's going to be 49/40, right, which is 1 and 9/40. So is 1 and 1/20 greater than 1 and 9/40? Well, I can't compare them yet because they're not in the same size pieces. So I'm going to put 1 and 9/40 here. Is that true? I have to convert this to a common denominator, which will be 40. 1 and 1/20 is the same thing as 1 and 2/40. And is 1 and 2/40 greater than 1 and 9/40? No. So therefore, question 4 is false. Question 5 is order from largest to smallest. Now we gave you these 5 fractions. And the first thing we have to do is find what common multiples. Now this one's a little tricky because we have to actually find the first common multiple all of them share. And because that would be very cumbersome, what I ended up telling you was the first common multiple 5, 3, 4, and 8 share is the number 120. So I gave you the hint by telling you that it's 120 for all of those. And all we have to do now in order to compare those three is we have to convert them into equivalent fractions. So I multiplied 5 by 20 to get 100. So I'd multiply it by 24 to get 120. Let's multiply both by 24 and I get 80. I get 96 120ths. I would multiply this by 40. So therefore I'd get 80 120ths is equivalent to 2/3. I would multiply this by 30 to get 120. So I'd get 90 120ths. And I would multiply this by 15, because 8 times 10 is 80, and 8 times 5 is 40. 80 and 40 is 120. So multiply this by 15, and I get 75. So once we have them as equivalent fractions with the common denominator, I can now order them from largest to smallest. This is the largest, so therefore 4/5 is the largest. This is the second largest, so therefore 3/4 is your next largest. 81/20 is your next largest, so 2/3 is your next largest. And finally, your smallest is 5/8, which would be 5/8, like that. Okay. Question number 6 says 3 1/5 is equal to how many fifths? This is really a grade 6 question of converting mixed fractions to improper. So this one we want to know, this 3 is really equal to 15/5, right? Plus an extra fifth, which means I have 16/5, which is your answer. So 3 1/5 as an improper fraction is 16/5. For question 7, we have 19/3 is equal to what is a mixed fraction? Well, how many 3's go into 19 without going over is really what you want to know. So I can make it 6 times, because 6 times 3 is 18. So 18/3 would really be 6. But since I have 19/3, that's really 6 and an extra third, which is your answer for question 7. Question 8 is the sum of 2/3 and 1/3. 2/3 plus 1/3 is, the algorithm is to add your numerators and keep your denominator. So if I had 2/3 and I had another third, I'd have 3/3, or simply 1. In the next question, I would have 1/20 plus 3/20. Since I already have a common denominator, I simply want to add my numerators and keep my denominator. I get 4/20, which in lowest terms both have a share a factor of 4. I'd have 1/5 as my answer in lowest terms. Question 10 is 1/3 plus 1/2. Common denominator would be 6. I'd have 2/6 plus 3/6. Add your numerators and keep your denominator. My answer would be 5/6. Just less than 1. For question 11, we have 1/5 plus 2/3. Common denominator is the first multiple they share. So if I looked at the multiples of 5 and 3, just to make sure we understand, the first multiple they would share is the number 15, which means it can be my lowest common denominator. I then create my equivalent fractions. 1/5 is really equal to 3/15, so I can write that here. And 2/3 is really equal to 10/15, so I can write that here. And 3/15 plus 10/15 is your final answer of 13/15. On the other side of the page, we have 2/5 plus 3/4. Your common multiple, the first one they share, will be 20. The equivalent fraction of 2/5 will be 8/20. And the equivalent fraction of 3/4 will be 15/20. That means when I add those two together, 8 plus 15 over 20, I'm going to get an improper answer, or 23/20, which is equivalent to, and this is what you should convert it to, 1 and 3/20 as an answer. Question number 13 is 5/8 take away 1/3. The process for subtraction is the same. I still have to find a common denominator. The first one they share, the first multiple is going to be 24. The equivalent fraction to 5/8 is 15/24. And the equivalent fraction to 1/3 is 8/24. Once you have your common denominator, you're going to subtract your numerators. Keep your denominator. 15 take away 8 is 7. 7 over 24 is lowest terms and is your answer. So if I want to say what is 5/8 take away 1/3, the answer is 7/24. Question number 14 says 1 1/3 plus 9/10. My gut says it's going to be more than 2, but we'll see. The first thing you can do is when adding fractions, you can simply add your whole numbers. In this case, 1 and 9/10 doesn't have a whole number. And then all you have to do is add your fractional parts together. And then when you do that, you simply use your common denominator like you always do. Make your equivalent fraction would be 10/30ths and 27/30ths. That's going to be 37/30ths, which is 1 and 7/30ths. Add that on to the 1 that you had before, and you get your final answer, which is 2 and 7/30ths. Question 15 says 2 and 1/8 take away 1 and 1/10. Now, when subtracting, it's always easiest to simply convert your fractions to improper fractions, and you can always work it from there. You don't always have to. You can use the borrowing method if you want, but I have always found through my experience that it's always easiest to convert mixed fractions to improper. So 2 and 1/8 is really 17/8. Take away 11/10. Okay? This is an easier way to rethink the question. Then you think of your common denominator. In this case, 40 is actually the first one they share, because 8 times 5 is 40. 17 times 5 is 35 and 50, which is 85. So that's 85/40ths is the same thing as 17/8, which is the same thing as 2 and 1/8. Take away 44/40ths, which is the same thing as 11/10, which is the same thing as 1 and 1/10. Now that you have a common denominator, simply subtract your numerators, keep your denominator, and you get 41/40ths. The last thing you want to do is rethink that as a mixed fraction, which will be 1 and 1/40th. Question 16 has more than one operation, and all you really want to think about here is that when you have three fractions that don't share a common denominator, rethink them as fractions that have a shared multiple. The first multiple that 2, 5, and 20 share is the number 20. So I can rethink these as equivalent fractions. This will be 4/20ths, and this will be 10/20ths. Once you have that, simply add your numerators and keep your denominator, and you will have 15/20ths, which when reduced to lowest terms will be 3/4. 17 is 3 2/5. Oh, I think I already did this one, didn't I? No. Did I make a mistake there? I think I might have. Go back in time here. No, no, okay, I just didn't do it. I must have zoned out. Okay, question 17 is 3 2/5. Take away 1 and 9/10. I'm going to now think, okay, so I'm subtracting mixed fractions. Never subtract them, always convert them to improper. That'll be 17/5, take away 19/10. Your common denominator will be 10. 19/10 and 34/10. When you subtract the two of them, you're going to get 15/10. No, sorry, not getting 15/10. Oh, yes, you're 15/10, which is 1 and 5/10, which in lowest terms is 1 1/2. And finally, your last question is a bus is 5/8 full. If a quarter of the bus gets off, means that if it's 5/8 full and a quarter get off, I'm going to actually take 5/8, take away a quarter. Find your common denominator, make your equivalent fractions. And if it was 5/8 full and a quarter got off, it is now 3/8 full. But it then says at the next stop, the bus doubles. So if it was 3/8 full, we have to add on another 3/8 of the bus to get 6/8. But of course, that's not in lowest terms. In lowest terms, it would be 3/4. So what fraction of the bus is full? Well, according to this, 3/4 of the bus would be full at the last stop. Hopefully this helps you with your test. Remember, your test is Thursday morning, period 3, right after recess. Please make sure you bring your pencil and don't forget it. And hopefully you do well. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the link below.